do you keep coming back, young man? See, this time I pick on you right away. Because otherwise what he would do is he would sit there for 30 minutes wondering, what question am I going to ask?
I come back because it gives me a place to get away from all the madness.
Place to get away from the madness. Yes. Yes. The only downside to that is when you leave here, what's waiting for you?
The madness.
The madness. So as you've heard me say week in and week out now, the practice ultimately is to figure out how to go back there and recognize that the only madness really lives inside your head. And all the craziness that's out there can impact us in a really detrimental way, or we can observe it and be a part of it and not let it completely consume us and destroy us, which is where most of us end up, allowing it to kind of shatter us, and then we end up here. So myself included. So anyone else want to share why they're here before we start? All right, so we'll do a little meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Okay, don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working, is this not working? Am I doing it right, am I doing it wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You're going to hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside the room. This is life. Life is filled with chaos and sounds, and the practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all of chaos. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working, is this not working, am I doing it right, am I doing it wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe, all right? Posture. You want to be comfortable. If you're on the cushions, often it helps slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed, hands can be on the knees or in the lap. If you're on the chairs or benches, also just trying to sit up straight. Shoulders relaxed. I'll say things periodically to wake you up or remind you that you're lost in thought, and just gently bring you back to present moment. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest, Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice. Observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Return to breath. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. with the body still, resting. And the speech, quiet, aware of all sounds. And the mind, learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything exactly as it is. Sitting. Breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize every feel now is quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, racing mind. Whatever you're sitting with at this moment is It's nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit, hold the hands, across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us, or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samutpatti, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddhist awakening. The word Buddha simply means awaken. He was a human being, no different than anyone in this room, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us in this room, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's what we get every single day. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how we respond to everything else that's happening throughout our days. And so all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation is not the escape. It's direct perception into the present moment and learning to be with things as they are. And sometimes things as they are quite difficult. And then we sit with that. And they continue to be difficult. And then we sit with that. That's the practice. If we think that someday our lives is just going to stop having complications and difficulties and challenges, I suggest having a different view. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, becoming aware of everything you think, everything you say, and everything you do. And learning to be aware what you think and what you say and what you do and the intention behind that. Buddhism is not separate from your everyday life. It is your everyday life. There's just things that came up today, and I'll just touch on this briefly, and then kind of open up to questions, thoughts, comments. But there's a lot of great Buddhist teachers that touch on this. To me, Chogyam Trungpa was one of the best at it, at least in what I've read. And his teaching on fearlessness and really understanding that if we can embody this practice of being fearless in our everyday life, then life can be more pleasant. But we get wrapped up often in fear. Fear of our own thoughts, fear of others' thoughts, fear of our words, fear of what others say, fear of judgment, fear of critique, fear of failure, fear of doing things right or wrong. We operate so often from this place of fear, and when we operate from a place of fear, we tend to then try to kind of manipulate and fix and change who we are to meet or match these ideas that other people have of us. Because we're often so afraid of what are they going to think. So then we shift how we behave. As opposed to being very authentic and honest with who you are. And that doesn't mean who you are is good or bad or right or wrong. But at least be real to who you are. Own that. You know, if you're a greedy, arrogant person, then own that. And be the best greedy, arrogant person you can be and work through it. But be fearless with it. Don't be afraid. For those who are brand new, I'm saying greed, anger, ignorance, it's the cause of our suffering, as the Buddhist teachings go. So that's why I'm kind of picking that greed, anger, ignorance. But if you're going to be filled with greed, filled with anger, and filled with ignorance, then be that way. But be real with it, be honest with it, recognize it. And then begin to look at, okay, if this is who I really am, how do I begin to alter things in my day so I'm less greedy, less angry, less ignorant? But when we're wrapped up in fear, we're not being true to ourselves and who we really are. Trungpa would say Buddhist practice is like standing on a very tall building, and the bad news is you're jumping. The good news is there's no ground to fall on. That one takes a while, but come back to that one a few times a year, and you begin to recognize that this falling that we think we're doing is really just an illusion. Maybe the falling we're doing is actually waking up. So explore being fearless in your life and what that means, and how much, if at all, freer or more liberated you would feel if you acted from a place of being fearless. Because operating from a place of wanting everyone else's approval and acceptance doesn't usually work so well. So I'd rather just open up to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice. Any questions you have that I can address at this time? Yeah.
What's the significance of the first statue that's behind you?
The real skinny guy who looks like he needs a sandwich? Yeah. It's one of my favorite questions, and I haven't answered it in at least probably 6 weeks, so it's good. So this guy behind me here, this is what's called the emaciated Buddha. And for those who don't know, a very brief summary, the Buddha was just a regular person 500 years before Christ, 2,500 years ago. He was born a prince and basically sheltered for 29 years. Had everything, all the wealth, all the riches, everything you could imagine. At 29 years old, he snuck out in the middle of the night, he roamed into the city, and he saw old age, sickness, and death, and an ascetic, kind of very simple, like a nun or a monk. And he turned to his buddy and he was like, do we all get old? Do we all get sick? Do we all die? And his buddy was like, yeah. And the Buddha had never seen this. His father knew that if he saw this, his compassionate heart would take over and he wouldn't want to be the king and rule, right? Their kingdom. So he sees these 4 sights and he basically says, I can't live a life of wealth and riches when there's a world out there that suffers. So he snuck out, roamed the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years. During that time, and again, this is India 2,500 years ago, so you have the yogi ascetic practice, and they would do all kinds of crazy things. They would stand on one leg for months at a time. They would stand with their arm in their air for months at a time. One of the things they did was it said they ate 1 grain of rice a day. And they say that he was so skinny that you could take your fingers front to back and they would actually touch. And they thought at that time that if they overcame attachment to the physical body, the physical form, that was the path to awakening. So that's how they lived. He then came to a river and somebody offered him food, kind of porridge. And his 5 buddies, I'll come back to it, but there's a sign above, or image above the exit sign up there. There's 5 buddies, and I'll make reference to that in a minute. But the 5 buddies he was with said, no, you can't eat. You're a sellout, you're a traitor. When Alex tells the story, he always calls him a food eater. It's like, you just can't eat. And the Buddha was like, at this time, he's just Siddhartha Gautama, he's just the dude. And he's like, and I'm paraphrasing all of this, but he's like, well, I'm hungry, And so he said, I'm going to put the bowl of food in the river, and if it goes against the stream, I'm going to eat. So he puts the bowl in the river, goes against the stream, and he decides to eat. So those 5 guys leave him. He regains his physical strength, goes along this way, eventually sits down for 21 days under a tree, says, I'm not moving until we figure out why we suffer. He had what they call the awakening. He began to understand the nature of all of his suffering was in nowhere but his own mind. Those 5 guys, and that's that image, they saw him sitting under the tree, and they were like, there's Siddhartha. He looks like he's figured something out, right? He definitely didn't look like the skinny guy anymore, for one. And so he sat down, they sat down with him, and he taught the Four Noble Truths, the basic Buddhist teaching: suffering, cause of suffering, ending of suffering, and the path. And they said, we will call you the Buddha, the awakened one. So he then went on his way, he taught for 45 years, and he died. This statue and that moment where he decided to eat introduces what's called the middle path. A great practice for all people, especially for lay people, right? So you think of anyone here play guitar other than Al? Probably raise your hand 50 times. Play the guitar, it's too tight, what happens? The string's too tight. If it's too tight.
No sound.
No sound, why?
Because it can't vibrate.
That's if it's too loose.
Oh.
If it's too loose, that happens. No, you know better than I would. What am I talking about? Right? Do I have to change my metaphor now?
No,
If it's too tight, doesn't it break? It can. But I'm with you. It also maybe doesn't work. The metaphor, we'll adjust it later. If a guitar string is too tight, it breaks. It breaks. Thank you. Right? If it's too loose, it makes no sound. So the idea is to find a balance, right? And so when we look at lay people, here we are. What's our balance, right? We're not monks. We're not nuns, right? We haven't gotten rid of all of our clothes and all of our houses and all of our stuff. Anyone here have stuff? Can anyone here survive with a little less stuff? Who has like 20 pairs of shoes? Nice. Could you live with 10? Absolutely. And if you got rid of 10, that means 10 people who don't have shoes could have shoes, right? How many of you spend maybe $30 on a meal when you got to eat? Could you spend $20 on a meal and still live okay? Absolutely. So then you got $10 and you could go buy some food for somebody who has nothing, right? Or put it towards something else. So we all have a middle path and a balance, and that middle path balance is different for all of us in this room. It's not like the Buddha said, this is the middle path. I take this teaching as what is our middle path, and for each of us to explore that in our own way. But coming back to the statue, the reason we picked the statue was that when we started the Dharma Bum Temple in 2006, we were, young kids, unenlightened, ignorant. We're still unenlightened and ignorant. We're just not as young anymore. And near death. At this point in his life, he was physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually near death, right? Starving himself. And that was us, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually near death. And so we picked that statue because it embodied who we were as Dharma Bums starting this place. That it was, instead of sitting with this great enlightened Buddha that we were trying to become, we had to recognize we are Siddhartha Gautama. And if he, in the same life, could figure out how to end his suffering, that was encouraging, motivational, inspiring for us, that we too could figure it out. So every day we look at that statue, every day I bow and I see that statue and I say, that's me, starving physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, near death. What do I have to do to be healthier? And I think it's a very real approach to practice. So that's the Emaciated Buddha.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And the big question when we came here, because we had the downtown temple and we had the Buddha for You and we had the meditation hall there in San Diego State, the big question when we came here was, well, what's our Buddha going to be? Well, it wasn't a big question to us. It was obvious, the Emaciated Buddha. But then when we were gifted these statues, we put the Kuan Yin Bodhisattva in the middle to bring more compassion to the space, because we already had our Buddha, but we felt what this temple, what this city, what this country, this world needs is more compassion. So the large statue behind the Emaciated Buddha is Kuan Yin Bodhisattva. Her name means hearer of the world's cries. So she hears all the suffering in the world and she pours out compassion to heal. And when we first put these in here, it's still less than a year, the big ones, but the vase to me just pours out compassion onto the suffering Emaciated Buddha as a reminder. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
I have two questions, but I don't know which one to go with. But the question.
Go with the better one. Because I might not give you the second one. Or combine them.
Okay. So I believe that I can't combine them, but I believe that like attracts like.
Okay.
The people in your life that you surround yourself with is a reflection of who you become eventually. That's what I've been believing for a little bit. But however, at the same time, like I've noticed that like psychologists and social workers, the ones that are supposed to have it all together, have people in their life that are like they're in unhealthy relationships, or they're surrounded by people who are not so healthy. For me personally, I think I'm healthy right now. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do for myself, but at the same time, I'm surrounded by a lot of unhealthy relationships.
Yeah.
I don't know what Buddhism says about people in your life and how you should approach the types of people you like in your life.
Got it. So the general idea is, let me sum up what you're asking. My first master, she used to say, Jeff, when you ask questions, don't look for answers. Just change your question. So I'm going to change your question for you, right? Now that I've known you all of like 2 months. Begin to look at your question specifically about how does Buddhism look at something. Forget how Buddhism looks at something. And recognize that you are going to encounter tons of people in your life, right? There's 70, 80 people sitting in this room right now. Some of them on a good day are healthy, and some of them on a bad day are unhealthy. I was polite by saying some of you, you know? We're all here. You're surrounded by a room filled with people who are mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually challenged, and at times extremely unhealthy. But right now, if you wanted a hug, every single person in this room would give you a hug. For the most part, it's my guess. Now, the real question is, how are you when you begin to engage with people who are healthy or unhealthy? It's not about what people you attract and bring into your life. It's about taking care of yourself. And then regardless of what people come into what type of people come into your life, you will be in a healthier place, right? Now, if I have a huge addiction to candy, right? Which actually I love candy, so it's a good example. I probably shouldn't spend all day in like a chocolate shop, right? Until I have the ability to actually be in a chocolate shop and not eat 12 pounds of chocolate. But either way, I have to work on myself. And I have to be prepared when healthy and unhealthy people come into my life. Because they will. Therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, social workers, you know what they all are? You know what the Buddha was? They're human. So we've addressed this before with your questions, which is being very careful about the role that you give people because of the titles that they have. They're struggling with life just like you are. Work on you, and whoever shows up in your life, you're prepared for that. Yeah. Something all that probably made sense. Yeah. Yeah.
So when I meditate and I'm still and quiet, I start to dream. And you said something when we were in our 20 minutes about like being conscious or something and kind of calming. But how do I do that? How do I bring myself
Back.
and I'm just so deeply quiet?
Yeah, everybody's different. So like, unless I were actually in that brain of yours, I can't tell you how to do it. We all do it differently, but I think it starts with just an awareness of what am I sitting with when I'm in meditation? Is my mind wandering to present sounds? You know, is it feeling the fan that's above you? Is it hearing the sounds next door? Is it hearing the cars that might drive by? Right? Just being aware of what is your mind focused and present on. And if you find yourself getting in kind of this like lost kind of train of thought and this story, then use all of these sounds to come back. Like that, the helicopter, whatever, I love when things like that happen during meditation, because that is more present than anything else your mind is focused on. When somebody sneezes or coughs, right, or startles because they just got woken up when I said something, right? Those are all wonderful moments to come back to the present moment. Begin to use all the things around us. You know, a place like Deer Park Monastery, they have a mindfulness bell, which goes off periodically, and everybody just stops. You just take a few moments and take some breaths. It's a practice also. It's catching yourself before you start to spend 5-7 minutes in kind of la-la land, you know? And sometimes also, if we're tired and we've had a long day and it's 7 o'clock and it's warm and you start to close your eyes and relax, you know what's gonna happen? You're gonna fall asleep. And that's not the end of the world, you know? But each of us is different. Just notice. For me, one thing specifically that I do with practice, my eyes are open. You know what you can't do when your eyes are open? Go to sleep. I mean, maybe you can, but I haven't figured that out. If I could, that'd be great. But my eyes are slightly open, and this is really the Zen practice where you can all try this. So close your eyes, and then open them just slightly to where you can see off the edge of your nose. Don't stare at your nose, you'll get dizzy. But look about 1 foot or 2 feet in front of you. And so your eyes are slightly open and you're gazing on that spot. So as I'm sitting here and I'm leading you all in meditation, my eyes are open. Okay? Because if I fall asleep, we're going to be sitting here for a long time. You know? Yeah. Sure. Other questions? Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with? Yeah.
I'd like to know about the other two.
The other two statues. So, good questions because I can kind of bring them into teaching. But so this one over here is Manjushri. He is what's known as the Bodhisattva, the enlightened being of wisdom, right? He sits on a lion. Now, imagine what it would be like. Anyone ever tamed a crazy wild lion? Anyone in the room? Before I speak on this, like I did the guitar stuff, I want to be like all wrong, you know?
Okay.
Or at least somebody can correct me, right? So imagine taming a crazy wild lion, right? That's what the Buddhist teachings is like and meditation is like with regards to taming our mind. That's how difficult it is, right? To tame the mind. And so Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, sits on kind of this playful little lion to represent, no problem, piece of cake. That ultimate wisdom is what allows the mind to settle and be calm and be tame. It has a lot to do for me with silence. The Buddha praised Subhuti, one of his wisest disciples, who he asked him to give a discourse on emptiness, which to me is the wisdom practice. And Subhuti said nothing. And then when the discourse was done, the Buddha said, "Great job, good talk," right? He said nothing about it. So to me, the wisdom has a lot to do with silence. To just listen, right? So that's Manjushri. This one is Samantabhadra. He represents great diligence, great practice, great effort. It's one of the what's called the 6 paramitas. Paramitas are, the word paramita translates to perfection. And it doesn't mean like that we're perfect, right? My favorite teaching from Suzuki Roshi says you're all perfect exactly how you are and you all could use a little improvement. And I find that really promising. You know, especially if you're out there and you always think you're such a bad, terrible person and blah, blah, blah. Like, no, you're pretty good. You just got to work on it a little bit more, right? So don't be so hard on yourself. So the paramitas are practices that help us go from a world of suffering, dukkha, discomfort, into kind of a liberation, peace from suffering, happiness. And those are generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom. Generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, wisdom. So wisdom, one of them you have with Manjushri. This one is Samantabhadra, which is the diligence, the great effort. And the 6 tusks that the elephant has represent the 6 paramitas that I just shared. And elephants are really beautiful, strong, brilliant beings, right? So Samantabhadra hangs out with the the six-tusked elephant. Often we think, especially maybe if you're newer to Buddhism, that you might have this idea or illusion that it's going to be this like, I'm just going to kick back and chill out, sit under a tree and meditate all day, and I'm going to be all Buddhist, and I'm going to tell my boss I can't come to work for 6 weeks because I'm all Buddhist. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my entire life. Buddhist practice is the amount of diligence and effort that it requires is harder than anything I've ever had to look at in my entire life. Because it requires 100% commitment to exploring not the people that come into your life, but your mind. How many of you want to sit and get to know your own mind all day long? Yeah, 1, thank you, 2. So I get it, right? But that's what the practice is. It's beginning to say, I'm going to be diligent enough to explore my own mind, because that is the cause of all of my suffering. And that's the cause of all of my happiness and joy. And that's rough. It takes effort. The kindness, compassion, these types of things. I was at a school the other day, and the principal was trying to rally all the students, get them all fired up. 300 students. And the principal was saying, you just have to be nice to people. It's really easy. And I'm like, who are you talking to? Right? High school kids are adults. Like, how easy is it to be nice to people all day long? I don't know about you all, but it's not. I don't think. It takes a lot of work to be nice to everybody all day. And this dude was like, yeah, just be nice to people. It's really easy. I don't buy that. It's hard work. At least for me. Yeah.
There's time for another question.
I think so. Yeah.
A friend of mine has been practicing for probably 12, 13 years.
Yeah.
And he gets very frustrated that he still gets angry with people. What would you say about that?
I would say that he's human. So the question we didn't hear was, a friend of his has been practicing for 12, 13 years, and his friend gets really frustrated because he still gets angry. You're not talking about you, are you?
No, but I mean, it's relative.
Just wanted to check.
I mean, sure. But
Nobody long enough. I didn't think he would do that. But so the anger, whatever emotions we have, anger, depression, sadness, right? We've had these, we've cultivated these our whole lives. And I think if we wake up and we tell ourselves, well, I'm a practicing Buddhist, so I'm never going to be angry, it's not realistic. I think that's it's not a healthy view to have. But to begin to honor, wow, I'm angry. Why am I angry? Right? Where did the anger come from? Why is it arising? What am I doing with it? How long is it staying? But to take this approach that I'm practicing Buddhism, so I'm not going to be angry or mad. Like, he's angry when he gets angry.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a practice. It's not a finish line like I'm there. And again, that's to me why that initiated Buddha is so important. Like, in the same life that dude awakened, he nearly killed himself. Right? So be with the emotions as they arise and watch them. Right? And often people, when they're new to practice, they'll ask questions about anger. Right? There was someone just last week, brand new, and he was sitting right where you were. Some of you were probably here. And he said he was so tired of living his life filled with anger. And this was day 1 in his Buddhist stuff, right? But the fact is, he's here. He's asking about it. He's exploring it. He doesn't want it anymore. And so for that individual, while I don't like to look at Buddhism as progress, that's a great kind of progression to reach a place where I don't want to live with anger anymore. And to your friend, same thing. In a way, it's good that he's so tired of being angry, because he's going to keep working on being less angry. But to set this bar that like all my anger someday is just going to vanish and go away, I don't think is beneficial.
Yeah, I think he this idealized, this idea of what it's like to be enlightened.
Yeah,
And he's aiming for that.
yeah. So this idea of enlightenment, right? One of my favorite expressions: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. So enlightened or not, you're still gonna clean toilets, right? It was funny, years ago downtown, we had a day of silence retreat with the college kids, and I think we were doing like a cleaning period or something. We put a little flyer together and said, you know, chop wood, carry water. We're going to be working at the temple, and the dude actually brought like, you know, an axe to chop wood. But enlightenment it's not a destination. To kind of your comment about your friends thinking it's somewhere you have to go. And I'll kind of close with this thought, this idea. The Buddha taught that we're all already awakened. We all have what the Buddha called bodhicitta, which is Buddha nature, right? Every one of you is already awakened. Yes, nice work, right? We're already there. You don't even need to be here right now. But the practice is, think of the metaphor to me, which is so beautiful, is you got the sun, right, in a cloudy day. When the clouds are out, can you see the sun? No. Why not? Because of the clouds. And when the clouds part, what are you left with? Well, the sun didn't just appear out of nowhere. It's always been there. And in Buddhist teachings, the clouds, that's greed, that's anger, that's ignorance, that's pride, that's ego. That's a sense of self that thinks I am right and I know best and everybody else should do what I want them to. All those clouds are in the way. And they're actually stopping the awakened being that's already with us. So enlightenment and awakening and liberation and nirvana and all these kinds of, and that is the danger in kind of like modern Western Buddhism, is people pick up all these books and they're like, I want to be enlightened someday. And they give themselves these crash course thinking that they're going to get there in like 7 years, right? Way too late before we wrap up to get into like Indian cosmology and the cycle of rebirth. But they say that the Buddha lived thousands of lifetimes before being born, Siddhartha Gautama, in which he became the awakened one. Thousands of lifetimes, right? Us, we read a couple books on Buddhism, and after 3 years, we're like, how come I'm not there yet? You know? And the reason we're not there yet is because the ego thinks that there's somewhere to go. It is actually the ego that is driving us to awakening that is the thing that is going to stop us from awakening. So you can tell them all that. Give or take a few. Yeah. So anything else before we close? All right, so we'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Kathy during her time of healing, to Josh and Jess and their entire family who may suffer at this time. May they all be at peace and free from suffering. May we all be at peace and free from suffering.